Hello everyone. Today's talk is a special talk, and it's titled Man's Ancient Findings. And what I would be speaking about is actually of what man can find from this world. So let's say we've acknowledged a sense of being a person and we're in this world, and now that we're in this world, we want to know more about it. We want to look at, in a sense, the ancient aspects of how we have come to be right now. When a physical being considers a sense of reality in which the space and time dimensions through an awareness of change are segmented in the sense that you have a past, you have a present, you have a future, and in a sense you began from somewhere and you're going to something, is actually a dimension of reality that is being kept. So it's like reality is like that because that is how it's being considered. However, as the awareness of who is considering it shifts, you will suddenly see from that sense of chronology or that sense of, from point A to going to point B, actually dissolves in an aspect of your existential experience that presents all potentialities simultaneously. So it's as if, imagine you just knew you didn't have to choose the path less taken by. You could just in an instant be both potentialities of reality by simply seeing the nature of being that is there, which in a sense is being understood from here. So we have a sense of time that is considered, that is in a sense kept by our view of it. Now, the mystic's eyes are no stranger to a changing world. And so the mystic will in a sense see that the unknown quality of the moment of experience is very important in how the definition of a being is being considered. Because if there's more to you than meets the eye, then it seems that we are in a world where there's illusion. When they tell us not to judge a book by its cover, and even that sense of mindset has its own projections of reality, with its own constraints. So now, you are a human being born in a world where questions have become your friends, very deep questions about your existence. And because you have an experience of past, you will see any being that is experiencing a moment of now will always find that regardless of the past it thinks it's being aware of or the future that it's considering, all of it is happening now. So you will see that the awareness of who you were is an awareness of now, which in a sense in ancient findings becomes in how man is finding the nature of being more than the limitations of form or his form. So what that means is you as a being, as a moment of existence, as a moment of just consciousness, are in a sense becoming aware that the relationships in which you identified and you thought were those identifications are not really you. Because you're seeing that identification is part of a greater collective. It's like, wait a minute, all those things that are defining me are my environment, are a part of me. Do you understand that? Your environment is a part of you because that is how you're keeping yourself as you. Because you're saying that's other and this is me. So when you pay attention to how a plane of reality is built, it's very important for the pilot to know the controls. And so the pilot knows it by allowing life to tell it what it knows. So I don't ask my friend about who I am. I observe myself and I know who I am. So the concept of ancient findings at times becomes how man is finding a multidimensional nature of reality where the creator and creation coexist. Because as some men have playfully said, like Meister Eckhart, the same eyes that God sees me is the same eyes that I see God. So your moment of being is your link to all reality. So you must not go study science alone You must study the sciences in its proper context, but then understand that there's an unknown context to you, which is the mystery of your next act, and also the greatest movement for mankind. Because great men do not need an audience to be great. They are great even in the shadows. They're great when no one sees them. And so they maintain that level of greatness by always being in the presence of vision. What that means is that if you think in life, you're let me say it like this. In front of, let's say, the man who goes to a, let's say, Starbucks counter and asks the cashier something, is giving a much different speech than the man standing in front of the UN. And the difference is actually the awareness of reality and the actuality of it. So you will see that why do you feel different? It's because you are choosing to be a certain type of speaker. You have not learned to let life speak through you. By not trying to speak, by simply communicating the moment as clearly as you know it. You will see that a great man who is looking at a great world in which to have great findings will see that he doesn't really have to do anything because of the ability of the higher vision. So when you know how to walk, regardless of your conception of space and time, if you begin walking, you will get somewhere. Your knowing will carry you to a greater sense of unknown, where that knowing wants to re-explore itself. That knowing of life within you wants to re-explore itself. And the whole point of this speech thing that I'm saying is that you need to be aware that regardless of your ideology, you are a great presence. And why are you a great presence? Because you exist. Knowing that you exist is your ability as a self-aware being in this dimension. That is the tool you're given as consciousness. So do not simply think that you need to have ideology, imagery, or know what to do. You simply need to be the knowing in that moment. And you will see that is the comfort of presence, where I am not trying to catch the butterfly in every moment. I'm not trying to look good. I'm not trying to do this. But naturally, I am so observant of my being that my being is its expression beyond how good or bad I conceive it. You will see that you cannot judge your life, actually. You can judge the ideas that you have of your life because you're still thinking you're an idea. So simply the movement of ideology has become the definition of who you are, and you are not that movement. Because, some drops just look at the river, you can just be looking at the river and you could be so focused into looking at that water that you forget who you are. And if you suddenly forget yourself in some river, you will see that a part of you knows that you're not that river. A part of you knows that you are observing this reality beyond the knowing that you do not know. And so it's that self-communication with your collective consciousness as an individual consciousness, which is actually the fruitful understanding that any person requires. What that means is that you give yourself the permission to have the greater understanding by getting so involved in life that you don't need permission. You see that it's like you're so open to receiving every moment that the moment is always bringing gifts because you're always aware of the new in your life. Being aware of the new means speaking in a way you've never spoken before. That sense is so different. It's as if skydiving when before you just look down from the sky, And so skydiving can even be in how thought dissolves into an existential awareness. That is even a greater fall than skydiving, In skydiving, the person jumps up and is in emptiness and just falls down, and out of that emptiness comes to a point where it's like, gosh, I need to move this, I need to get this parachute out, And so the person gets the parachute out. However, you will see that in any fall, there is always an implication of a rise. And an inferior mind would try to translate the movement of the limitless, will always find that it is its own limitation because it's choosing to conceive in such a manner. Now, you will see that in your life, there will come moments where you will wonder about the information that you are considering to be your reality. And it's okay, guys, to doubt. Doubt means space. It literally means you have opened room to move, and so now that's why your reality is changing. It's as if finding that extra room in your house that you never knew there was an extra room. You're like, whoa, what could be in that room, And imagine you go in that room and you actually see it's another door outside, and you're just fascinated by how you can, in a sense, play with your reality beyond its, in a sense, fixed and closed forms. So, in acknowledging your moment, you will be aware of a past that is also existing in this present moment. And so many people might think that's a sense of multidimensionality, but actually no. That's actually still linear. Multidimensionality is not linear. So you cannot, it's as if like you're not just one mind, you're 10 minds. And so if you're 10 minds, all those 10 minds are one mind. So the only way you can understand those 10 minds is by realizing that you are those 10 minds. Because how else would you be in that greater heavenly definition? People create images of heaven for themselves that they can never have. And so that's the dilemma, because heaven is everyone's interpretation, right? I mean, not everyone has the same view of heaven. For example, those who work with that imagery. However, you will see that the relationship is as if in this dimension, your lack of awareness creates suffering for you, which creates punishment. And that dynamic is a natural interpretation that's just happened. What you really need to see, you are an ability beyond terminology. You as a being are this moment of existence that has an awareness to words and sound and meaning. So many people, for example, let's say if you as a human being, someone comes and says something to you and you get bothered and you're like, what did you just say to me? You are choosing to interpret those words with the values that you're considering in that moment to then give that response. But it's never just your interpretation. In other words, if you told me what you think an apple is, do you think that's the only definition of an apple? No. So reality must be tolerant into observing itself into greater reality. You must always have the space of your expansion. And you must realize the reason there's space is because there's an unknown element to you. When there is an unknown element to you, that simply means don't think you figured it out. Keep walking, and this is why you need a certain level of humility. You need to be like, okay, I don't know. Let me tell you the levels of humility back then, for example, in ancient China or Japan, let's say, and to now. There's a story of a monk, and this monk is simply there who actually, let's say, a sage. And this sage is there, and this sage has been just giving talks, and he's a wise man. He thinks he's a very wise man, right? And so, because he's understanding how he's just communicating nature, and so nature communicates well. So he suddenly had a lot of people come to his, let's say, they became his audience at first, and then they are like, we should be your disciples. You're so wise. You're like an enlightened being for us. So you should begin teaching. We're all your disciples. So pretty much the people made themselves his disciple because he was saying some good stuff, right? However, The story goes on where this person, he feels as if it's a sign. These disciples have come to me, I am enlightened. So he stands there, and one student asks a question that begins with why. And one of his disciples says, why this master, or whatever they would say, why this guru, you know? And the guru saw that in the back of his bald head, a sweat just, screamed out, as if it was a scream of like not knowing the answer and being in that condition where as if, shit, I've told these people I know the answer. So what really happens is this man is so humble that he immediately stops. He does not let the question even finish of the student, and says stop, and closes his eyes, breathes, and tells them, I am no longer the role you guys think I am. And he leaves for 2 years. Suddenly this wise guy who was, helping in this town and being that sage in that town, suddenly leaves for 2 years. And then, after 2 years, comes back, completely realized. And suddenly the people have such more respect for him, because they knew that this man was honest enough to say, I don't know, at the right time, until he dissolved, and then life became his knowing, and he came back. And that is simply a sense of realization. It's an existential sensitivity to life, that you are life, so you are beyond interpretation. And as you are beyond interpretation, consciousness has ways of moving fluently in regards to how it conceives itself. It's as if you're realizing you're not just growing as a physical being, as this bubble of awareness. You're reaching this point of acknowledging your plane of your dimension of reality, your plane of existence, to such a degree that you're actually becoming an experience of it. Imagine that person who was around trees so much, he on some subtle level, he had the experience of them. What that means is he knew. It's as if it's as if life, in its communication of the moment, is free to do anything. And so you will see, you as consciousness are able to always go into a more deeper sense of antiquity within yourself. But that antiquity will dissolve out of time, and this is what Mr. Within is telling you, to be aware. Because man is opening up to technologies within his inner realms. So in other words, you're becoming aware of how this sense of internal is communicating the external, not the external is giving you certainty of the internal. So all those people who were like, I need to see it to believe it, well, if you have to see it to believe it, they will put anything in front of you and you will believe it. So it's very important that you be aware of who is there to even believe. And so this is when you pick up your sword and you run into the battlefield, not with the sense of fear, but with the sense of the greatest dance of your mastery of the sword has begun. For example, you go in the setting, not in the sense that you're limited, but that the sense that you are the allowance of the limitless. And this knowing is simply stop interpreting and be aware of what you are. Very simple. Be aware of what existence you are. Existence is not something someone else has to tell you, because you're aware of it. You're aware of your own existence. I don't need to teach you about existence. And that's why the wise gurus say, don't ask about existence. You know what I mean? You are it. Observe it yourself. Because you can come and, let's say in many traditions, there have been people who've looked at gurus. They've been around the guru and they've seen the way this being is conducting himself is the higher state of allowance, right? So, in that sense of observance, many people have gone, but you need to understand, regardless of how much you see something, it's up to you to make that experience direct. It's as if when you walk in life, many things are indirect. In other words, you're aware of it, but it's as if it's not aware of you, But it's up to you to go and tap life on the shoulder, tap your ambitions on the shoulder and be like, hey, life, I want to build this. Want to help me with it? And suddenly you will see you're absorbed into this natural moment where your purpose has come to life by no longer being shaped. It's as if that idea that you visualize has now also integrated with a sense of personality in which you as a aware being create the platform for your mind to display. So it's very important that you realize that your internal realities do not need to be communicated, because you're limiting them. It's as if you're giving, for example, you're wearing very very, Alaska fit jacket in summer. Do you know what I mean? It's so unnecessary to just go into that reality of thought in where you are thinking that way. So now as one gets this awareness how this sense of linear reality is present through a non-linear awareness, you no longer are interested in wanting to know things in the same way that you did. And so what that means is you stop asking questions actually. You really stop asking because you realize the answers are only where you are. So it's very important to just be aware of what you are. Now, it is crucial to know that when you have, as Sadhguru playfully says, done work in the past or in other realities, it simply suggests that you are considering yourself to be a linear being, and because you are creating your spectrum, you can also create the greatest findings. So you will see that the person who thought he had a past life, if he looked deeper, he would suddenly see he's also that sense of consciousness that is conceiving form. So it's as if like presence has an intelligence beyond my linear interpretation of presence. Do you know what I mean? It's like regardless of how much I explain to you what a polar bear is, when you see it, it's like a different experience, right? So you need to know that not a lot of people can give you that reality of experience when you're externally seeking. It doesn't matter even if they do. It doesn't matter if you go to the most realized person. If you're not aware of how there's an internal and external still, you, in a sense, will continue to be affected by that sense of duality which is in your subconscious. In other words, think as if the person who has free will is actually a choice that's made many choices. And so in making these choices has realized each one of his choices can also make choices. So the creator in making creation was a multidimensional spectrum of reality in its origin. So the minute I chose to speak, worlds began to be presented to the ears that were present. And so you would wonder if you were Eve. And so you had taken this apple and you were suddenly told that you had made a mistake and you did not listen, and so you were, in a sense, condemned. Before you were condemned, what would you say to God? You would say, because you are the first creation of God, God is more than your form. And so because God is more than your form, limitation can never have a face the moment it is aware of its limitless gaze. And that is when ancient findings become more than just how you're interpreting reality to satisfy a sense of need in the moment. You need to realize you need to be totally handling actually your physical sense of reality at first. In other words, a spiritual person is not someone who's like, oh gosh, I'm spirit, and just he's in his imagination and he's trying to be something in your reality. Listen, it is not linear. So just be authentic in your life, and that is the best path. And this authenticity comes when you realize the value in self-awareness, not trying to find knowledge, trying to, in a sense, seek it because you want to, because you can. It's like, it's one of those deeds that you're doing not for yourself, but for the life that you are. So it's as if this is how you, as a plant, are growing. And it's very crucial because in our awareness that we are more than our limitations, in our existential allowance for the conscious to be present with all that he considers unconscious, the object of experience becomes the knowing of the experiencer, kept through an awareness that, because it cannot be compared to anything, because it is not shaped, it is unstructured, and it's in a sense empty. So you will see that the greatest forms of mankind are held by the intelligence of the formless. Similar to how there is a vast void that is keeping this pebble spinning in our reality. Because the rotations of the earth were always more than what the concept of rotation or the definition or the terminology of rotation could ever define. You will see that you will, in a sense, move through your thoughts as if, like, you're the sky that's right now here in this room. Then suddenly, this idea of you is aware that you're in the room, so you're aware that you're thinking, and suddenly that awareness dissolves into a moment of I don't know, where in that I don't know, you're seeing new images. You know, many people are not sensitive to their external dimensions, because if you are, it'd be more intense than a psychedelic experience. Do you know? If you become sensitive to the intensity of life beyond the stories, beyond your context, if you simply become that empty cup that's ready to simply feel the beauty of what's being poured into its experience, you will see that the God that you consider is based on the God that you see. When the being can have a simultaneous and multidimensional experience of reality and realities, language becomes a one-dimensional tool in a two-dimensional world, where the third dimension was always keeping the first and the second dimension. You must have an ability to acknowledge yourself beyond a storyline, in the sense that you see ideology is natural movement. It is like that bird on the branch where you can't do anything to it and it can't do anything to you. It's simply just natural movement. You will shift between your sense of space and time continuum in the sense that the way you're acknowledging your memory in the present moment becomes simply as the awareness to it, not the relationship of the awareness. So in a sense, the object is no longer an object because the subjective view has been seen, and the subject is no longer in that subjective view because an existential knowing has been seen beyond the dimension of dualistic conception. So when there's an experience that is of a different dimension of intelligence, the experience of your transition would be a void. And so this is simply what happens when the brain chemistry shifts to a point where your eyes receive emptiness into the form that you are. When you look out, there is external reality. When you consider that as an out and look within and look in, there is nothing there. And it's as if you can't see yourself, but you're always seeing everyone. And this is important because you need to know the self is not a game. The self is not shape. It's not the only display of information in solidity. You know, it's beyond conceptualization, and so that creates a huge value to know thyself by observing how each external aspect of reality is suggesting its dissolution within your internal awareness as a being, as a presence that can contemplate in one path, and in a sense also manage its nonlinear awareness by just being there as it is. I have found that it's as if I was never really convinced by the idea of past lives and even future lives, which was an idea that I kind of opened up to myself, in a sense that it was just, suddenly I felt it was like that kind of relationship. But you see, you only need something when you're holding something. If you're holding nothing, you really don't need nothing. So nothing as non-existence doesn't really need existence. But existence in playing with itself is seeing how there are non-existent aspects. It's as if like if you were watching TV, you suddenly change the channel and you just wonder, whoa. It's like I am no longer the same because my observance is no longer the same awareness to the same pattern of form, to the same design. An infinitely changing design can choose to call itself Bob, but it doesn't need to. I saw it as if all thought and all form and all image is naturally present in my reality as a river that is just flowing. So if I was to observe the dynamic of a river and the dynamic of myself, that imagery is all the imagery I could need to just be present in this reality. Do you know? However, when I see the dynamic that it's as if my thoughts are a natural phenomenon, that I'm not here to stop thinking or think less or to find a thinker. As I just became aware as presence, as something that is not, that it's like there's no word not, because it's not being anything. It's just there. And so the sense of now, the sense of here, from that there was an innate quality of knowing which was actually the deeper aspects of your intuition, where you can no longer call it intuition because it's becoming more of your direct experience. Intuition seems like a guidance from the sidelines, but it's not a guidance from the sidelines. It's actually the certainty you have in your roots. So it's like you're not just a physical presence, you're also present in subtler realities that are, in a sense, keeping this reality here. So it's as if that painting that had the painted picture of the whole world was being carried by 4 guys across the street to the MoMA gallery, you know? So it's as if like the whole thing was being present through the experience of another sense of presence. And so there is this dynamic, of course, of a hierarchy, because we're in a reality that you don't avoid the hierarchy. You don't say none of this exists in the sense that it's not. You say that by acknowledging all this hierarchy and by being open not to just the best sciences, to the best philosophy, or to anything, it's like there is no longer a best. It's just you are so interested in all that you observe as form in this reality that you are a formless knowing, because that is how that excitement is present. When people say follow your excitement, in your excitement you are lost to your greater findings. And so that's when ancient findings really lose their dust of antiquity, because you simply see that you are choosing definitions to cover the actuality of something that you're experiencing beyond even a sense of experiencing. So it's as if, guys, language has not even evolved to a point where we can acknowledge some of the most beautiful abstractions of imagination, to even be able to term them. Language must be put in greater platforms and greater dimensions. So it's as if you are no longer that being who is being told that you're in 3 dimensions and the 4th one is time, or in a sense, your experience of time and space. You kind of see that you can choose to be in a box and then try to get out of it. But I choose to explore life without a box. So it's as if I do not assume I know anything. And then I walk with perhaps the emptiness that suggests the beauty of an endless sky. And so beings will understand the I don't know aspect will give them more of a conscious self-reflections of their existential view, of how you are viewing things as a moment, of being, as existence. And so you will even find yourself having abilities to acknowledge your memory in new ways. And what that means is, there was a time that I thought I was just experiencing my sense of past, present, future as a story, not as a story, but just, even though it's a different story every time you remember it because you're in different environments, but it's like how I was keeping myself as a sense of self, as an idea in my mind, would sometimes shift because I notice forgetfulness is a natural thing that happens. So even the greatest scientist may suddenly forget something, and oh my God, why have the science suddenly been broken by the bridge of forgetfulness? You know, it's just that the science is an additional interpretation. The truth is a reception of your existence in the now beyond interpretation. And so the unknown is your greatest teacher, not somebody here in this reality that knows something. Not somebody. And this does not mean do not seek teachers. Actually, what I'm saying is that on some internal level, you should know that your internal dimensions are there for you. It's your exploration, and that your internal dimensions will shift your external dimensions. It's not that your external dimensions are just keeping your internal dimensions. You have externalized a projection of multidimensional presence where you are just looking at only one part of yourself communicating. So it's as if many of us are under the impression that we are just this one sense of being. But no, a collective intelligence is as if you are becoming aware of a sense of connected mind, where you see those 10 minds were actually the 10 people in that ship in, for example, I don't know, some movie, let's say like Matrix or something, when they're going to Zion. So we simply see that sight in some moment of acknowledgement of experience and existence cannot be seen. So be comfortable with your reality. Mr. Within has always said this, get comfortable immediately. So do not expect to be treated comfortably, or in a sense be treated as if you're a king. Just always be comfortable. Be very simply comfortable. Do not agitate or in a sense excite your ideology to a point that you need something. I mean, of course you have certain things. I mean, do not avoid the values of survival and how you need to maintain yourself, but just let all that be naturally done, you know? So many people are thinking that because a being does not have the same standard of living as them, they are weak or they're less or they're inferior. Wrong. And sometimes there are people who have less and see people who have more than them, and they are also in their judgment of them having more are wrong. So you see the communists, in a sense, this is my view of course, communism is a clarity that rebels against the nature of man to then try to be a satisfaction to a greater display. But in a sense, it feels as if those who speak in such ways are ignoring a sense of work to say that there's no work to be done. It's we need to be very aware of the different aspects of our personality that are in a sense communicated to us as storylines and branches of how we are refabricating our memory. Many people go through experiences that in a sense push them through boxes of ideology. So you become convinced that you just talk to God. You become convinced that you're this person. You become convinced that you're a prophet. You become convinced that you're this and this, this and this. You know, your convictions are fine, but a true being who is aware of the ultimate reality does not need to communicate it. So that is why poetry is very beautiful, and poetry should always be one of man's greatest revelations, because it comes from that aspect of him that is acknowledging the unknown. We have too many people who know it all. There's just been too many people who've just known it all as human beings, and so now it's important to not know it all from an external view, but know how all of this means something to you. And so you don't need to shift that which is governing you. Because you will see that today you're bothered by what the government's doing. But what if a hurricane comes? Who are you going to complain? Is there a courtroom you could go to about natural disaster? No. So assume that the bad governance of your environment is a natural phenomenon. Just assume like this is how much humanity has developed in my country, in my region, and this is it. But do I choose to be defined by that development as a being, or am I simply an authentic moment of experience? And a sense of being beyond definition, so do not think that you can know me through words. But when you get to know me, it is then where you will see a man with empty eyes will give you the world. That those people who were giving revelation or have ever communicated revelation were never people. They were simply moments of reality just expressed. They were simply the collective knowing in which an observer chose to, in a sense, bring forth a new reality of objective symbology, let's say. I always realize that humility is found through a sense of being playful with yourself. Guilt is best handled by playfulness. So think as if you've been this person who you've been in this battlefield fighting with guilt, you know, just constantly fighting with forms, depressed. You're like, gosh, I'm not being this person I'm not being this, I'm not doing this, gosh, I should be doing this, you know. Just for a second, if just like how we press pause in a video game, we could just do that in our life and go sit down on perhaps anywhere and just calmly contemplate and observe, the still mind will find that the movements of reality are always teaching it. So a sense of humility appears because you are an infinite observance. And so because you are an infinite observance, you realize that it is you who are choosing how much value the solidity needs to have for you. You will see that there are those people who, for example, let's acknowledge celebrities. There are people who have gone through many relationships where a relationship actually has been their whole life's work. Just the relationship with their work, the relationship with people, their relationship with form. So if Mr. Within could, in a sense, quickly just bring every human being's attention to how we're all aware of a relationship of form, the awareness to that relationship, which in a sense is the awareness to the thinker, is an existential dissolution beyond ideology. So when you go through that sense of dissolving it as an idea into really realizing the presence that you are, you get the clarity of the wind that moves between the branches. You become the affirmity of the roots that do not need to be shown but are there. And so you see that the greatest fruits, your greatest life's work in this reality does not need to know where it came from, similar to how the tree's roots are there, but it does not need to, dig in the dirt to find that treasure. The treasure of knowing comes to the transparency of your allowance to be life. In other words, you're like, gosh, I've been trying to be a hero my whole life. Let me just try to be life for a second. And how do I be life? Well, I can't define it through thought, so let me just sit down and be. And so you lie down on the grass and you look at the clouds and you see, wow, my thoughts are even shaping the clouds. I'm such a god. However, you see that even those faces are looking at you, and as all faces are, you will know that life doesn't care about the story as much as it cares about the actuality of your existence. Mankind has not even experienced the beautiful gateway that is love. Because you acknowledge love as this concept, as this relationship, as that moment where we have popcorn and where our arms are moving to yawn. However, it is beyond imagery. And so when we realize that there's an existential relationship beyond form, we no longer seek to be informed in the same way. Man's ancient findings become his moment of experience. It is able to move in the sense of conception, where you can, in a sense, on a subtler dimension, be present in your reality, in your memory's reality, and experience your memory again. So it's only the person who thinks that, oh gosh, the memory's gone, that was my past, that's not me, is who does not have access to it. The person who is not interpreting but is being will see that his multidimensional nature of moment, that undefinable moment which is your experience, because it is novel, will be the portal to how your ideas were never there. You, in a sense, become an experience of next. And so the intensity of this dissolving into this sense of multidimensional intelligence, nonlinear multidimensional intelligence compared to just the linear intelligence is like being aware that, for example, it might be very hard for me to completely visualize how I look like today, and for example how I looked like yesterday. But if I consider my existence, for example, as a shape, let's say I have played around with shapes, and I've recognized that, for example, for me, I'm comfortable with an inverted triangle. And triangles don't have to have any meaning, but they can be a profound source of meaning. But you don't want, the triangles are not teachers; they're just vehicles. So you can choose to make them a teacher, and then there could be delusion, there could be deception, but that deception is still self-created, so you can always get out of it. So when you realize you're present in a world that you're untouched, you don't worry about what, oh gosh, triangles mean something bad, What does bad mean? You're saying triangles mean bad. What does the concept of bad mean to you? Ask that and you dissolve into your moment. You become realized in an instant. So now, as we see that one can, for example, in my yesterday, I can visualize what I did yesterday. I was sitting, for example, on another bench in the park. I might not be able to completely physically visualize this moment merging with that moment, but I see that through a vehicle such as a triangle, for example, I can see the triangle being present there, being now. So you can see that the knowing of your different memories are the same. Trust me. It's not that you knew less then and you know more now. Your knowing is the same because you're aware of the simultaneous natural dimension of how there was no unconscious and there was no conscious. You were never consciousness. You were just the sense of isness that could not be interpreted. And so the unspeakable could have never been a more beautiful sound. It is very important to work with yourself. Your life's work includes how much you're maintaining this. So let's say, for example, you just stopped. Regardless if you were a millionaire or if you weren't a millionaire or whoever you were. Let's say you just stopped for a second. In that moment of stopping, you will see that you have a choice to move through different states of being. So when I stop, I have a choice to take the path less taken by or take the path taken by. And just for people to know, one of Mr. Within's ideas on simply how to handle any situation in life is just become aware of the situation and stop for a second. And as you stop, and as that pause button is pressed on the controller, which is the ego in a sense, we experience a sense of your totality that is new. So if I say, I'm only this shape, when I observe new shapes as a shapeless intelligence, I'll be like, whoa, I'm more shapes. So in acknowledging physical reality, in acknowledging and having our own sincere and authentic curiosity and longing to learn about our dimension, our teacher no longer becomes language or anyone who can communicate. Our teacher becomes our moment of existence, which is our communication. And you will see, regardless of if you're that person, you're like, oh gosh, I need to be around people. You see, no, you need to be aware of your moment of being. So you see that the only place you actually exist is in your moment of being, which is now. That is your platform of existence in which your knowing is just present in. And because you see you're a moment of being with infinite potential, when you observe, when you get the intelligence of the observer, which is infinite, you can bask in your moment of being without moving. So if I was to go in a cave, I would see that if I had no choice, and if I was in a sense, as let's say many of our criminals are in a sense put in cages, if I was suddenly put in a cage, I will observe that. Because it's not that the great man is free. It's not that the greatest men were free. It's that the greater men saw that there were greater cages than the ones they were thought they were in. It's that the yogis saw that there was an ability to acknowledge an illusion for there to be an ability of an absolute experience. So everything is needed as it is. Don't think that you lack, and don't think that you, in a sense, don't lack. Don't have approval or disapproval. Do not give life to imagery that is unnecessary and that does not serve you. You give it life by playing with it and by communicating it. A very wise man 1,000 years ago named Hafiz, around that time, said, "The words you speak become the house you live in." And what he meant by that is that how you communicate in this reality is creating your reality, buddy. So if I could tell you an advice, and if Hafiz could also tell you an advice, it would be aware of how you are communicating or are a communication. So like that's when presence becomes interesting for you, where you're like, what am I beyond words? What am I beyond my ideas and these ideas? I am in awareness of life. And so an awareness of life cannot be judged because it is always being aware of all. And that is when you know yourself, because you don't need to say it. It's as if you've just felt your roots and you were never bothered by the dirt. And so in all ancient findings, as man works towards the archaeology and the true etymology of his words which have created worlds, he will see that L in world, which also is similar to the word is that a world exists with love. Love is authentic awareness of reality in the sense that you are the existential allowance to be. In other words, people can call you anything, people can throw any form of communication at you, people can throw masks on you, people can do anything. But if you know you exist and you have the certainty of existing beyond needing logic to prove that you exist, then you are a comfortable presence. You will see that ideology cannot attack you. And in that battlefield, you have simply seen that you were never just on the battlefield. You could be in your living room and you could still be in that battlefield as well. And so the experiences are very infinite as you become aware of the simultaneous sense of reality which is present. In other words, it hasn't been spoken enough in the West, and I'm here to say it, Mr.Within is communicating that your existential communication has multidimensional views. But these multidimensional views are not the same multidimensionality that's explained in movies or you think in regards to science. Science is its own road. What I'm telling you is the path less taken by in the West. And that is one of, instead of going to books first, instead of going to ideology first, you go to your existence first. You go observe. You take the concept of meditation, you rip that name and you make it your own time. And you go and sit down and you contemplate your life. You go sit down and you become aware of how you are a physical being. You become aware of your body. You become aware of the beauty of the park that's right there. You go look at the grass. You look at the flowers. You see the intelligence of the design is communicating. The intelligence of the design is now. Separation is a choice. When you are the experience of many choices. And the most ancient finding is that once you have gone through the multitude of reality, once you have gone to the deepest aspects and edges of thought, of mind, of form, of how you are a person going, whether you're re-experiencing in your ideology, in your subtle thoughts, the crucifixion of Christ, or the silence of Buddha by the tree, or the dissolution of a being that is not even in physical form. Regardless, the most ancient and powerful finding is the finding that it all comes to you being right here, right now. When all your worlds close and come to the nothingness, which is the profundity that has kept your moment. And as you are, know that it doesn't matter how much you consider yourself to be human, because you are always a being, my beloved human being. Much blessings and namaste.